Dubai Eye 103.8.
103.8.
So the question that we are posing to you today is, can you live a zero-waste, plastic-free, carbon-neutral life here in the UAE? 4 very special guests joining us now to discuss that and many other topics. Many of them you will have heard before here on Dubai Eye 103.8. All of them have opinions aplenty to share, not just on some of the issues that are being raised here at WETEX 2019, but some of the global issues as well. We're going to introduce them to you individually. Then, of course, we will come together around the table to discuss things a little further. Let's go to Mariska Nell first. You know Mariska. You've heard her here on the show several times before. South African-born artist and environmentalist. Somebody who is doing so much to raise awareness here in the region and further afield. Mariska, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely to see you all well.
Yes, everything doing well. Yes, a lot of projects that's coming up, which I'm super excited to be sharing with you guys as well today.
What about the art as well? That's going further afield, isn't it?
Yes, the art is doing extremely well as well, spreading some message through the artwork, so everything seems to be going well and going global as well.
Going well, going global. We'll get the thoughts from Mariska in a few moments' time. Also joining us is Dua Benhida, the Zero Waste speaker. She's live here with us from the zerowastecollective.org. Thank you for joining us, Dua. Thanks for being on board, founder of the Zero Waste Collective, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate you. Talk to us about the collective, if you can, what you personally and the collective hope to achieve.
So the Zero Waste Collective was basically founded for two main reasons. The first one is to obviously create awareness on the problem of single-use plastic, and more importantly to help people live a zero waste lifestyle, which is possible. And it is a collective because it basically gathers all the local startups that offer zero waste alternatives. So I want to help them get more exposure at a cheaper cost as well. So basically everyone gets to know about the problem and everyone joins the solution and the zero waste movement.
Great to have you on board and willing to give your thoughts, share your thoughts on today's panel discussion with regards to zero waste and other issues. Also joining us, Chris Barber's with us. Chris is the founder and the CEO of Degrade. You've heard him on the show before, makes clothes of plastic bottles, many other recycling initiatives. Good to have you, Chris. All well?
Thank you. Good morning. Lovely to be here.
Good to have you on board. For those that don't know out there, tell them about Degrade. What do you guys try to achieve?
Okay, so we are a solution for plastic pollution. We collect local plastic, PET plastic bottles, and we shred them into flakes and extrude it into fibre and produce our own green spun yarns from 100% recyclable plastic bottles. And we can basically do anything that is created through conventional polyester, but using recycled bottles as our feedstock.
Great to have you with us, and I know you've got opinions to share with us, as does our fourth and final panellist this morning into the afternoon. Karl Feilder is the CEO and founder of Neutral Fuels, creators of the first net zero biofuel in the Middle East since 2010. Karl, good to have you on board.
Hello there, nice to be here.
Thanks for being with us. Tell us a bit more about Neutral Fuels, how you came to set it up and what you set out to achieve.
Well, we're following in the recommendations from last year of the UNFCCC that says that we need to be net zero by 2050 as a planet if we're actually going to have a 50% chance of avoiding 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. So all of this recycling, zero waste and everything has to sit within the context of being net zero. 20% of our carbon emissions worldwide are transportation. Using our fuel can take that to zero. We are net zero fuel.
Great to have you, all 4 of you, with us, and plenty of topics for us to discuss. I think we start off from the top, if we can, with the question that we posted online and are asking all of our listeners today. And we'll get responses from you both and then take it a little bit further. The question we've posted is, can you live a zero-waste, plastic-free, carbon-neutral life here in the UAE? Is it something that is achievable, and if it's not, what are the challenges that are lying in front of us at the moment? All good and well us discussing it at the moment. Let's get some practical advice. Let's start with you, Mariska. Can you live a zero waste, plastic free, carbon neutral life in the UAE?
I think that's a bit of a challenge. Yes, you can definitely try your best, but I would say 100%, because most of our food and everything is coming from other countries, so that kind of posed a challenge. And the other thing is also that a lot of us is not typically from the UAE, so sometimes there is the odd flight in and out. But yeah, I definitely think we can get very close to zero if you try and go all out. Definitely.
And you personally have tried it
Yes.
in more ways than one, that's for sure. And what did you learn from those experiences?
I definitely think it's a journey. It's not something that you can wake up tomorrow morning and be like, hey, I'm going to be zero waste and I'm not going to have any carbon footprint at all. I think then you're going to be in for a surprise. We need to first change our habits and learn how to do all of these steps and then take it from there. But definitely to get as close to zero waste as possible, it is kind of achievable here in the UAE.
Karl, in terms of that goal, if you like, and I think step by step is probably a good way to put it. I mean, is it unreasonable for us to put into the very question zero waste, plastic free, carbon neutral? Could you do that all in one fell swoop tomorrow, or should it be step by step?
Well, first of all, we run a net zero business, and therefore we have net zero impact on the planet from our company. If it's possible in a company, it's perfectly possible to do it, but you have to follow the steps, as Mariska said. First thing is you have to assess what is your planetary impact, measure stuff, and that means collect lots and lots of information and measure it. Secondly, you have to reduce, and when you finish reducing, you have to replace it with alternatives. And what we're doing as a business, we produce a net zero fuel, but we still have impact on the planet from our operations. So we calculate that, we reduce it as much as possible, and then we plant trees to exactly offset the carbon emissions of the rest of our operations, creating a completely net zero business. It could be we're the first net zero business in the Middle East, but we certainly are producing the first net zero fuel.
Companies making the right decisions there, what about individuals? I mean, you talk about the collective as well. If a company makes that call, it's a move forward. But what about poor little me as well? Can I make that change overnight?
Well, no, absolutely not. Just like any other lifestyle change, whether you want to quit smoking or you want to lose weight, it does take time. I think, like Mariska said, it's not a destination. It's not something you become ultimately. It is the goal, yes, but it does take a lot of time to be zero waste. Simply because, I am the living proof, for example, that I did achieve zero waste in 2018, but 2019 came and I was like, okay, I'm going to be traveling, my husband's here, he's going to be using plastic. So like Karl said, it's about reducing, and if you can't reduce, reuse and recycle, and it's the 5 R's of zero waste from B.I. Johnson. So we have to keep in mind those 5 R's. It's a journey, it's something that will take time. And I do talks for the community, zero waste talks, and my biggest giveaway, my biggest tip to people is choose one swap at a time, master it, make it a habit, and then move on to the next one. That's the most sustainable way to become zero waste.
Chris, obviously these are phrases, these discussions are being had the world over at the moment about trying to live the zero waste, plastic free, carbon neutral life. Is it more difficult here in the UAE, WETEX?
I think there's, certainly as far as bottled water is concerned, there's a lot of discussions about whether it's actually safe to drink the water or not. There's a lot of research has been done to say that it's perfectly safe to drink the water. I remember actually when I was a teenager, bottled water actually came onto the market in the UK through health risks and, or at least the media pushing health risks of drinking water from lead piping. But still people drink water from the taps in the UK. So there has been a lot of media hype behind having to drink bottled water. And similarly with other plastics, there's a lot of unnecessary plastics being bought out. But there again, there are a lot of necessary plastics. And I think the whole thing is, as Melissa was saying, we need to change people's behaviour. We need to get people to understand that, they need to minimise the amount of plastic they're using, but they also need to recognise the fact that they should be recycling it. And this is just common nature. Plastic was invented to be recycled. It is actually a resource material. We see it as a resource and not a waste. That doesn't apply to all plastics. But PET plastic, which is food-grade plastic, there's a real necessity for it. It preserves the life of food. It's a very safe and a hygienic way of transporting water. And it's very cost effective, obviously. I mean, from a consumer point of view, yes, it's great to say I want to be carbon neutral and zero waste. But from a commercial perspective, a lot of food companies rely on plastic in order to preserve the life of food. Otherwise, we're going to end up harvesting far too much food that is just going to be wasted. So I think it's just a case of being responsible and recycling.
Karl, difficult imbalance there. Bit of an impasse?
Well, I think part bridging the sort of commercial and the consumer, one of the challenges is that there are not any really great recycling solutions here present in the country, apart from Chris and us and a few other sort of limited opportunities. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that currently it is nearly free to dump our waste in the desert. And secondly, that it is no restriction on exporting our waste to countries overseas unless they don't want to receive it. So the two things we need as government policy change is we need to have a meaningful dumping fee that puts a real value on waste, which pushes back up the supply chain all the way to the consumer, so that when I go and get my, as I did this morning, my Starbucks, and they give me a plastic unreusable cup, and they give me 2 or 3 plastic bags and 5 paper towels, and then put it all in a big carrier bag, that it becomes their cost when I want to dump that.
Absolutely.
That then pushes the chain right up back to the manufacturers, who then change the way they behave. Consumers can certainly moderate their change. We can reduce what we do. But what we need to stop pushing that stuff into the supply chain. And the way of doing that is to make it too expensive for the suppliers, so that we have a landfill tax that makes it very expensive for them to dump it.
Exactly.
And then when they want to recycle it here, it then becomes viable for us to set up recycling plants. I mean, there's one company recycling glass here. I don't know much about anybody else recycling other plastics. There's very few people that can afford to set up a recycling plant in the UAE when there is no cost to waste.
Yeah. And if I may say, sorry, very good points, Karl. The other issue is that because there's zero waste, as Karl says, there's very little recovery, and we need a critical mass of material in order to sustain a recycling plant. So if we don't have that material, then there will be no recycling.
Thanks very much indeed for your text messages. Loads of text messages coming in for our panel, which is great news because we've got a 4-person panel here discussing some of the issues that are being discussed down here at WETEX. A big thanks to Mariska, to Dua, to Chris and to Karl, who've all answered our calls and come on down here. Let's get over to you, Dua, if I can. Going to get to some of the text messages in a few moments' time, but interesting what we were hearing there before the break, and I saw you nodding away in agreement. The issue of recycling, which is fundamental to a number of the discussions going on here. What's easier to do? Is it easier or harder, whichever way you look at it, to change attitudes or policies? And which ones need to change first?
Well, I think, like Karl mentioned earlier, the change has to come from policies, from governments, from companies, from schools, right? But I do think it is a lot easier to change a behavior, because I do talks, I talk to people, we have amazing companies that are in touch with people, and like we keep on saying, it's all a matter of knowledge. Knowledge is power. If you know about the problem, you get to find out about the solution and you get to act. So again, it's a journey. Recycling is one step forward to becoming zero waste. It's definitely something you have to do, right? But ultimately the solution is to be completely zero waste. And that's something that people have to understand. It is possible. It is like I said again, it's a lifestyle change, it's a behavior, right? So you'd be surprised at how many people I meet at my talks and they actually have no idea that you have shampoo bars to replace shampoo bottles. Or yes, okay, everyone knows about the coffee mug, everyone knows about the reusable water bottles, but no one knows about these very easily available in the UAE as well, alternatives, zero waste alternatives. So I do think it is easier to change behaviors rather than policies. I wish it were the other way around, honestly, because the government has the power and all the big companies would be able to do that if they really want to.
Mariska, sorry, just to jump in, but Mariska, to bring you in, just in terms of this change of mindset and the change of education, which is all good and well, and I think we're all singing from the same song sheet here, but there are hurdles, and be they not just policy hurdles, be they a lot simpler. I mean, just in the last couple of days, I've seen or had bottles of water confiscated from me or emptied trying to enter certain establishments. That mentality still exists here, as does the person in front of you at your petrol station or gas station filling up on gas insisting on a plastic bag, right? Not saying no to a plastic bag, insisting on one when it's not offered. I mean, how much of a hurdle is that to get over before we move forward?
I definitely think it is about educating people as well, because, and I feel kind of recycling is also, although it is a solution, it's not really a full solution. It's also become, for me, a problem, because now people feel that it's okay to use that plastic water bottle because I can recycle it, or it's okay for me to use that plastic bag because I can recycle it. And I don't think a lot of people actually know what can and cannot be recycled. And also with those water bottles, yes, when it's been recycled and it goes into, products, every single time that products get washed, you are sitting with microplastics, which is tiny pieces of plastic that goes directly into the water stream, and that is becoming an issue. And I mean, if you look at seafood and everything that we eat, probably contains that now. So I definitely think it is something that we need to change the habits, but we also need to enforce stronger rules and regulations on that as well.
I really want to have a bit of an argument, actually. Sorry.
I'm ready for you, Karl.
This is the right place for it.
I'm next.
So, Chris, just taking your one. First of all,
I might just go to the bathroom, all right?
I'm no great expert on microfibers or anything, but there's quite a lot of filters between your washing machine and the sea. Secondly, the fish are going to die through climate change before they're going to be poisoned by plastic. So I don't actually know why we're all banging on so much about reducing and recycling plastic, when really what we should be on is reducing climate change. The United Nations, not the world's most crazy bunch of people, in fact the most conservative bunch of people, say we have to be net zero by 2050. There's now 70 world governments declared that they support net zero by 2050. There's now 570 companies, including Nestle here, who've said they're going to net zero. That is because we need to preserve the planet. Yeah, sure, we can recycle stuff and we can work out how to reduce stuff and we can do all composting and all this great stuff. If we have a too hot planet and we can't support ourselves on that planet, all bets are off. Everything is over.
Absolutely right, Karl. When you look at the production of conventional fabric versus recycled fabric, our recycled fabric actually uses 50% less energy, 20% less water, and produces 55% fewer carbon emissions than creating virgin polyester. Forgive me for saying so, but you are wearing polyester.
Yes, which is a second-hand item.
It doesn't matter. It's still going to leach microfibers into the ocean, just the same as recycling. I do wash it
with a guppy-framed bag as well, so there is ways around it.
You're also wearing jeans, I think, which
is moody jeans. They're dry jeans.
Hundreds of litres of water to make a pair of jeans, if not thousands of litres of water to make a pair of jeans. Organic cotton uses far more water than conventional cotton. So nothing is fantastic, nothing is right on the planet.
Yeah.
All we're saying is that, by recycling an existing material rather than using a finite resource, we are at least making a contribution towards zero waste.
Right, ding, ding. Back to your corners, you two. All right, back to your corners. Let's go to the tweets and the posts that are coming through online. Let's get social with Zina Zelamea.
Yes, of course. The question we're asking is it possible to live a zero-waste, plastic-free, carbon-neutral life in the UAE? And if not, what needs to change? Loads of responses from people on Twitter. Yoga says, we lived a near-zero and plastic-free life while I was growing up in my country. We had no electricity. We walked, cycled, and plastics unheard of. We had no trash at home. In Dubai, I'm trying my best. I use AC sparingly daytime and no AC at night. I do have a car, but mostly use the metro. That's rare. I lead a minimalistic life and follow the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. I shop only when it's essential. My phone is 4 years old and still using it. We've got another tweet saying we need clean, filtered water available everywhere to everyone, period. Drinking from plastic bottles was always a horrid idea. That's from M. Cook at MK Newman.
He's not here watching, is he? Let's get to some of the questions that are coming through online. Let me post it out there and feel free just to jump in if you've got any comments to it, team. This one from one of our listeners saying, with up to 80% of business being generated from the public sector, unless the public sector has clear KPIs to drastically reduce their carbon footprint, or use of valuable resources. It'll be business as usual regarding the environment. Most staff working in the public sector just simply don't comprehend and or don't care about climate change, loss of biodiversity and the destruction of the oceans. There is a very deep sense of selfishness and a rejection of change. The parallel is how domestic staff are viewed and treated. Interesting points coming through as well. Again, that comes down, doesn't it, to the whole idea of the individual as opposed to the corporation. Is there a common ground?
I don't think that whoever wrote in is actually correct. I think that there is a general awareness that we need to do something, and I think there is a global tide of awareness that is sweeping. You can't go on Google or see any of the international news without realizing that the world opinion has changed since October last year, which is when the FCCC issued their last report. 1.5 degrees is seen as the limit, net zero is seen as the target, and for the first time, I've been doing this for 13 years now, for the first time we have an expression that works. It's not green, which doesn't mean anything, that's a colour. It's not sustainable, which is an English language word which nobody can define. We have net zero. It means exactly, it's a number, and it means something that we can actually do. And that awareness is about to hit the UAE. I'm just waiting for the UAE to declare itself as a net zero by a certain time. It's doable, it's something that we can do within policy, it's definitely affordable, and it's definitely something that the people want to do. The people actually do care. I disagree with whoever wrote it.
Do we agree, team, with that? Will the country go net zero?
I definitely hope so, and I agree with what Karl says, believe it or not. But yeah, so I definitely think, it comes down to policies and everything, and if the country declares itself as a net zero, that they are aiming for that, it will come. And also you've got some passionate individuals in this country that's just like making ripples everywhere. And so I definitely think it's something that we're going to aim for.
But is it, and do it, I mean, is it net zero in inverted commas with reason? Because something you made up earlier, or brought to the table earlier, our reliance on air travel here. The large majority of the population need to get home to see their parents at some point, or their loved ones, and they've got to get on a plane.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I said when we first started. I said that, zero waste is, again, it's a destination, it's a journey, because of we all live here, we're all expats, so we all have to go back home, but it's all about keeping the 5 R's in your head. And if you can't refuse, if you really can't say no to that travel back home, then at least reduce it. Instead of going twice a year, maybe go once a year. Unfortunately, there's only so much we can do. I mean, my goal in life is to be net zero, obviously. I'm working on different areas of my life, and that's actually one of the other things I say in my talks. It's, yes, waste, zero waste. It's the plastic, it's the packaging, it's food, it's slow fashion, but it's also energy. So it's about being mindful. And again, knowledge is power. If you are aware of how much fuel you're consuming, water, electricity, only then will you be able to reduce it.
It's not that complicated. Really, the problem with this is that we're making it too confusing for people. If you fly to the UK, you can calculate exactly what the carbon emissions and the impact is of doing
and
that.
Offset it.
And you can either buy an offset, which is some complicated thing where loads of people make loads of money with carbon credits, or alternatively, you can simply plant trees. One tree planted, you can go to their website, you can give them a credit card number, they will plant 15 trees to offset your flight to London. Done. Impact, net zero. It's that simple.
Absolutely.
I just think, I agree, the consumer really wants to try and make a difference. I think the problem is, certainly that we find in business here, is that there are organisations with very staid policies. I'll give you an example. We did a collection campaign, we collected some plastic and we made some product for a company. When we submitted our invoice, they were in Abu Dhabi. They wanted us to tape by courier an original invoice to them before they would issue payment. So we had to send a courier that actually had to then come back with a receipt just to pay an invoice that was actually less than 500 dirhams. Yeah. Where is the common sense?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, is this whole idea, and that's why I pose the question. Without that common sense and without that sort of common understanding, are we therefore facing something of an uphill battle? And that's not to be uber negative of everything that's going on here, because as you say, this is a global movement at the moment, but the very sort of thinking has to change surely at the moment, because the idea of convenience is what's driving some of the problems here at the moment. If you can get fuel delivered to you by a fuel-burning truck to your car, wherever you are, I mean, that's convenience on the doorstep, isn't it? I mean, not saying that's one of the reasons that we should all be should be concerned here, but without that mindset, without the big policies, without the Nestle's making their changes, nothing's going to happen.
But exactly that point. Everything that we're consuming is produced by companies, pretty much. Very few people are subsistence farmers in the UAE. So everything's produced by companies. If the companies change their policies, we can end up with net zero products on our shelves delivered to our supermarkets in a net zero way, and all of that hard work is done by the companies. Now, what we've found in 13 years is that those companies that do that take that pioneering lead, end up more profitable and more competitive, and they have happier customers because they realize that they're actually not damaging the planet as bad as they were. So if you want a better business that actually operates more profitably, then you need to declare yourself net zero. Simple.
Here's another one from Gregor out there. Can you please ask your panel, what is the app or the website, if they know, that we can go to offset our carbon emissions? It would be good to know regarding the planting of trees, etc. Anybody know?
So I normally just plant directly through One Tree Planted. So there, I interviewed Matt, also the founder, on my podcast 2 weeks ago. So that I just mainly use them, and I kind of calculate how many trees it would be, and then I just do it myself.
Their web address is www.onetreeplanted.org.
Exactly.
Get yourself on there, Gregor. Another one coming through. More of a statement, so feel free to jump in and give us your thoughts. I would have done that. I've just crashed the system, so we'll leave that for a moment. We'll try and get that back up for you. In terms of some of the other comments that are coming through on Twitter, let's get some more of those as the social media accounts are being generating thoughts. Zines, over to you.
Yeah, so we've got the question again. We're asking, is it possible to live a zero-waste, plastic-free, carbon-neutral life in the UAE? And if not, what needs to change? We've got Daniel Mark Evans saying, I don't think so, purely because of the AC factor. I'm not 100% sure what the impact per person would be, but I'm sure living in a virtually completed AC society must be quite a lot. That said, it means we have to do our absolute best to offset it. Not just plastic straws, but I think we all have to really think about how we offset our impact here. Do we really need 4x4s? Do we really need to live in a 6-bedroom house when there's 4 family members? And a lot of people absolutely agreed with Daniel.
Let's get some more thoughts from the team as well. I suppose that's one of the issues here, isn't it? Is the fact that we all do things to scale. Do we need to scale our sensibilities back to a certain degree? Chris, can we start with you on that one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're fortunate enough to live in this lovely country, a very luxurious lifestyle, generally speaking, compared with a lot of other places on the earth. And we are kind of spoilt with, as your previous caller had mentioned, constant air conditioning. I mean, quite unnecessary use of air conditioning in most buildings. Certainly, we work in offices where people are having to wear jumpers and cardigans because it's so cold, which is just crazy. And then, as he also mentioned, driving massive 4x4, 6-litre, 8-litre trucks up and down the road, and just really no regard whatsoever for the effects on the environment. So I think there's. I think that really is a mindset issue that we discussed before, where people are already used to the luxuries of life and they're not really thinking about the future of the planet. And that's what we need to change.
Another statement that's just come through, and let's get some more thoughts on this from the team. Why don't we become net negative on CO2 greenhouse gases by 2050, also reduce waste first and make recycling of the remaining waste mandatory after that? It is doable if resources are finally priced right against reinstatement value instead of being priced against sourcing only. We are the only species that can make a difference.
I'd agree with that. I mean, it is doable. I'd be happy for the first step to be net zero, but if he wants to go for a completely negative, that's also doable. None of this is as hard as we've all made it out to be over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right since the 1960s, where we started getting confused about what was sustainability, what are we trying to do on Spaceship Earth. The whole concept of us being the crew and not the passengers led to a discussion of how do we want to live our lives. Your comments about do we want to drive a 4x4, do we want to live in a big house, all of these things are lifestyle things that are going to take 1 or 2 generations for people to get their heads around. We don't have 1 or 2 generations to fix this problem. And that's why I keep banging on that it's up to businesses to see the commercial advantage to going net zero, because businesses take decisions in faster than that time frame. Typically, business would take a decision with a 5-year lifespan, and humans would take a decision with a 20-year lifespan, because that's one generation. I think business is the solution to this. Net zero is the answer, and how do we get to net zero is simply the question.
I absolutely agree with everything that Karl just said and that comment we just got, because yes, of course, businesses and corporates have to do that work and that effort, but in the meantime, us as individuals still have to do whatever we can until, you know, more companies join us in the movement.
So what I found interesting from this discussion, we started out asking a question. We're going to finish asking a question, if that's all right. We asked, can we live a zero-waste, plastic-free, carbon-neutral life in the UAE? I think we've all agreed there is no simple answer. In fact, if there is no simple answer, if there is no one answer out there, can we sort of bring it back from the answer to maybe a question? As we wrap up, what's the question we should be asking at this stage for an answer, rather than demanding an answer at the moment? What's the question we should be asking of our listeners out there at the moment, large corporations, individuals? And let's get that as our final thoughts and wrap-ups from each and every one of you. Mariska?
I think when you talk to like individuals, you know, I would go, and my question always is like, ask yourself, do you really need that? Do you really need your AC switched on 24/7? Do you really need that extra something? You know, do you really need to go and buy 10 pairs of jeans? Do you really need... Ask yourself that every single time before you do something, and see how you can reduce yourself. And, you know, that might have an effect on your organization as well, and then also with companies as well. Ask themselves, you know, do they really need something, or can they switch it out for a more environmentally friendly options?
Good questions. How do people get in touch with you, Mariska?
So they can, on my Instagram's probably the easiest, designed by Mariska, and also on the podcast Mama Earth Talk.
Karl, questions and contacts?
Well, I really think that the point in the UAE is that everybody that's here, in their family, has one person at least who works in a company or organization. Rather than worrying about recycling everything in your home, what you should be doing is putting pressure on your organization or company to declare their net zero policy, their net zero strategy, and give them some assistance, point them in the right direction how to do this. Just search net zero on Google, you'll find a whole load of assistance on how to do this. The world is going that way. It will be that way here within the next 12 months. That's absolutely my expectation. And how to get hold of us is www.neutralfuels.com or www.biodiesel.ae.
Good on you, Karl. Really appreciate your time. Do it over to you. Questions and contacts?
I'd say the question is, to everyone listening to us, is what is it going to take you for you to make a change? What I say in my talks is plastic is to the planet what the cigarette is to the smoker. We won't see the damage until it's too late. And I do not want us to reach that point of no return. I do not want us to reach that point where, you know what, we have cancer, we got to treat it. We need to prevent it. So I guess I really want to have people start thinking about what is it going to take? Is it really convenience? Is it, like Mariska said, do you really need it? Start leading a minimalistic life. Choose whatever it is that you need to work on. Zero waste is very personal. I started with reusable bags. My sister started with composting. So think about it. And like Mariska said, do you really need it? And think about what is it going to take you to actually make the change. To get in touch, my website, www.thezerowastecollective.org, and my Instagram, zwasteuae. Thank you.
Thanks so much indeed for your thoughts. And Mr. B, Mr. Barber, over to you, sir, to wrap things up with a question. Let's finish with a question and a contact.
Well, I agree actually pretty much with what the whole panel has said. I think people need to look at what is needed, what they really need in life, and try and work around reusing products without dumping them, and buying more sustainable products, and obviously buying things that they can recycle, because if they can't recycle it, it will end up as being waste. My contact details are chris@dgrade.com, and the website is www.dgrade.com.
To all of our panelists, huge thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of WETEX 2019.
This is Dubai Eye 103.8.